Tell me this much first of all. Are you satisfied now, after a year of it, that the government that is in place, the minority government and that you support through the supply and confidence arrangement, is giving the country a better government than the one that you had the option of putting together with Enda Kenny, the partnership one?
Well, we didn't have that option actually, as is demonstrated. But the bottom line is the government isn't performing well over the last year, and I think the reason is fundamentally about the internal issues within the Fine Gael party. I don't think the Fine Gael party gave Enda Kenny a chance to settle down in the aftermath of the general election. Quite frankly, there was a lot of angst after the loss of so many seats. There was anger, notwithstanding the fact that quite a lot of people became ministers afterwards. Fine Gael TDs became ministers. I don't quite think they settled down in terms of the government side of it. And we've had this ongoing issue as to when Enda Kenny was going to leave office. He had indicated he wouldn't contest the next general election. And I think there was a lack of focus, a lack of proactivity. It's not the opposition's fault that legislation hasn't come forward from the government side. I think of bills like the Technology University Bill, for example, the School Admissions Bill, the Public Health Alcohol Bill, they've all been left hanging around. There has been no engagement with the opposition. There may be need for change or amendments, but we're willing and up for it in terms of actually delivering on some of that legislation. And I genuinely believe that internal issue within Fine Gael has been the fundamental reason why the government hasn't got out of the starting blocks, and hence the lack of penetration and achievement in housing and in health.
Do you think that can change now?
Well, I think it has to change, and I think there has to be a greater focus on execution and delivery as opposed to just publishing strategies and announcing plans. And I think there has to be a far greater degree of proactivity on a range of policy fronts to get delivery for the people, because the situation in housing is getting worse and access to health is becoming worse. And obviously that's something that has to change and has to be corrected.
But if it hasn't worked so far, I mean, what makes you think that a change of leadership in Fine Gael is going to make any change? Make it worthwhile keeping in office?
Well, that's open. That's something that has to be assessed. And I think what I would say is that it would seem to me that the ongoing navel gazing within Fine Gael, or the whole issue as to whether the change and when the change would take place, has been a factor, I think, in retarding the government's capacity to deliver. There's no question in my mind about that. Ministers, are probably for the last 3 months wondering, will I be in this ministry next time, after the next Taoiseach is elected. So I would like to think that focus will emerge out of all of this, but that remains to be seen. I take your point.
Are you then prepared to stick to your commitment to not bring down this government, or at least to leave them there for 3 budgets, 1 done and 2 to go?
We've been upfront and straight in the first year. We've honoured our commitments. We did want to lead a government originally. We didn't get the support in Dáil Éireann to do that. Smaller parties wouldn't support us. We have an enormous challenge in Brexit, for example. It's a once-in-a-generation challenge that I'm not so sure people appreciate the potential level of economic damage it can do to this country. So we're very mindful of that. And we are prepared to honour our agreement in terms of the 3 budgets and in terms of getting delivery on the issues that are contained in the agreement between us.
But if they have failed to perform so far, why support them for another 2 budgets?
I remember the 1981-82 period. I do not want to preside over 3 elections in 18 months. I think it's reasonable that time and space is provided to get some action on certain key issues and prioritisation of key issues. But yes, we will be watching that space very carefully to make sure that there is delivery, and also a degree of generosity of spirit in terms of the implementation of the agreement between ourselves, Fine Gael and the Independent Alliance, particularly in terms of issues like mental health, for example, which was a core part of the agreement. And the government fell short this year. Now, we had a meeting yesterday actually with the Taoiseach and Helen McAtee, myself and James Brown, a mental health spokesperson, because we've been pushing for a greater allocation for mental health. There was 15 million instead of 35 this year. We've been assured there'll be a full year 35 to start off with for next year. But again, we're not happy that there was a lack of generosity and transparency in terms of that particular issue, but we're continuing to focus on it. Issues like career guidance, there has been restoration, substantial restoration of career guidance, but again, a bit of dragging of the feet in terms of ring-fencing for ex-quota teachers. So we want to see concrete measures achieved in these areas that are contained within the agreement.
Would you hope then, or intend, that in the 11 days or so between the 2nd of June, when the new Fine Gael leader emerges, and him, and it looks like it's going to be a him now, being voted through, or his name being put forward in Dáil Éireann, to have a serious discussion reviewing the supply and confidence arrangement, or what do you intend?
It will be more around the implementation of it and the delivery of it. The agreement is only a year old. We're far more concerned and focused on getting delivery. So are the people, by the way. People want, for example, I'll give an example, the Treatment Purchase Fund. Again, it's been 6 months since, we were told in the last budget money's been provided. It hasn't happened yet in terms of actually getting people operating, getting the operations in place for people who are waiting for various things from cataracts to hips, scoliosis patients and so on like that. So that lack of action is a worry for us. There's a commitment to the Treatment Purchase Fund, all of that, but we need delivery because the waiting times are at an all-time record high.
So you are clearly prepared on the Fianna Fáil side of this arrangement to see it continue on. Would you be concerned at all, for instance, that maybe it could become destabilised internally? I mean, Shane Ross, for instance, described Enda Kenny as the glue that has kept this government together. There'd be a different kind of mixture going in now to try to retain it. Could it not fall apart internally?
Well, there's always those issues, and we can't control that, and that is beyond our control. We have to honour our agreement and our facilitation that we agreed to at the formation of government and the delivery of the principles and policies. But that obviously is beyond our control. I think it's interesting that Shane Ross would say that. He wouldn't have said that 12 months ago, So,
well,
Shane's
I think he said it some months ago.
Yeah, but I mean, Shane is a guy that needs to step up to a bit. The fact that he hasn't met his European Union counterparts or his British counterpart in transport, I couldn't get over that, given the enormity of the Brexit challenge. And I think some of those have to step up to the plate and do a bit better.
You clearly will have a different person with whom to deal at the head of the Fine Gael party and presumably the head of government. Let's just look at some of that in a little more detail. Remind ourselves, first of all, of something Leo Varadkar said about your party while negotiations were going on to form a partnership government. The water issue was still causing problems 60 days into the talks when he appeared on this programme and accused your party of being ridiculous.
I've been involved in these talks almost every day for 60 days now, and I found the concentration on Irish water, quite frankly, to be a little bit surreal. There are lots of things that Fianna Fáil could have threatened an election on. They could have insisted that we restore public sector pay. They could have said that they wanted us to develop an Irish National Health Service, and somehow or another we would have had to found the billions to do that and maybe give up on things that we wanted to do. So the fact that they went to the wire and threatened an election and threatened not to facilitate a new government on water, I just think is ridiculous.
Won't be easy dealing with him if it is him.
Well, I mean, in my view, it's up to each leader to approach this with a pragmatic and professional approach. I mean, he was wrong on all of that, of course, because we didn't threaten anything. And what's interesting, that whole clip gives an interesting insight into the dynamic that was going on. Because Enda Kenny and myself had agreed upon principles of this. I had said to Enda Kenny, for this government to have any chance of sustainability, the water issue has to be dealt with. And the quid pro quo, quite frankly, was the entity was to continue. We didn't have a majority to move on that, but the charges had to go.
But he made a very big point, didn't he? And that's what he has a capacity to do.
But you see, it was a disingenuous point to the extent that, on health, we wanted delivery on practical solutions to health. We had witnessed 5 years of failure by Fine Gael on health, including Leo's tenure in health now. He did very little, only commentate and move off. But I have a capacity to deal professionally with people, with politicians from across the divide. I've demonstrated that in government and out of government on issues like the Lisbon Treaty and so on like that. So I will approach whoever gets elected as leader with that professional approach.
Isn't that a two-edged thing, though, from your point of view, Micheál Martin? You've been there now at a senior level in Fianna Fáil, been in cabinet. You were in cabinet 20 years ago and you've been leader of the party since you've been out of office. And maybe somebody like Leo gives a freshness and an appeal that has a broader footprint, shall we say, than anything you can offer.
Well, I think over the last 4 to 5 years, I've been out and about meeting and engaging with people and getting a very warm response.
But are you not more the past than the future?
No, I'm not actually. I don't agree with you. And I think I have solutions for the future. I have ideas for the future of the country. And I'm willing and very committed to really trying to get the fundamentals of the country right in terms of a strategic direction. Our infrastructure is falling back. In terms of education, there's been, in my view...
But there is this X factor that Leo Varadkar appears to have that you could say, and pardon the comparison for geographic reasons, that hasn't been evident in Irish politics maybe since the days of Jack Lynch. People want to have their photo taken with Leo.
Well, we all get lots of photos taken, Sean, and I think you need to calm it a bit. We'll wait and see. And as far as I'm concerned, what people actually want is not just getting photographs taken with politicians. They actually want delivery. If you meet people who can't get houses, who can't get houses to rent, to buy, or even get a council house, to be frank with you, they wouldn't take too seriously what you've just said. And likewise,
in terms of health,
and the same would apply to health and so on. That's what ultimately people want.
Yes, of course. But you can't discount the other as well. I mean, the face and the poster.
But we'll wait and see.
There's another thing that has maybe a double-edged dimension to it for you as well, is the idea of a Cork Taoiseach, not Micheál Martin. Simon Coveney, in other words.
But that doesn't faze me at all. It doesn't faze me at all. And when we went into this agreement, I factored in, obviously, that there would be a change in the Fine Gael leadership in the aftermath of the election. Throughout my life, I have focused on what I can do. I've never overly focused on those coming behind me or those at the back or those who might want to threaten me. I've never looked at life that way.
Which of them would you fear more?
I don't fear any of them in more or less. I would respect any opponent, because the first lesson in life is that once you start disrespecting somebody or underestimating someone, you will fall victim to that, or you will not perform. So as far as I'm concerned, it's a new challenge for me as well. And that's always good, because that brings out the competitiveness in the person, and you up your game.
And your parting
And there's been a degree of hanging around. The last 2 or 3 months, to be frank, it hasn't been good.
Your parting thoughts on Enda Kenny then?
Well, I found him a decent individual. I thought he brought great energy. I made a point yesterday, one of the fundamental tenets of our parliamentary democracy is public service. Something I'm very passionate about and committed to. And I said to young people, please get involved in politics, get involved in your community. I think Kenny discharged, more than discharged, that commitment to public service.
Would you accept as well that he showed great political skill?
I think in terms of bringing Fine Gael back, he was quite a skillful, quite a ruthless operator internally as well within Fine Gael, and some of that perhaps was not ultimately productive in terms of the people who left the party and all of that. But I think he in my view, we got on well. We disagreed on many political issues, and I think there are many issues that remain to be dealt with.
Just one thing in regard to your dealings with his successor. What about the area of justice, that particular portfolio, the controversy surrounding the Garda Commissioner? Are you satisfied, or will you be looking for undertakings that the Garda Commissioner, in whom your party now has said clearly it has no confidence, will be removed by the next Minister of Justice?
In terms of the confidence in supplying our agreement with Fine Gael, they will elect their leader. They're entitled to do that. As far as we're concerned, we have an agreement, and it's on the agreement that we will be looking for delivery on. We can't be bringing extra issues in or extra dimensions into that.
Would you oppose the reappointment of Francis Fitzgerald?
Well, again, and I just want to be very clear on this, we've never said, never discussed the idea that I would go to whoever is elected the next leader and say, you can't appoint this person or you can't appoint that person. That would be a matter for the Fine Gael leader, whoever is elected. I'll be very clear about that. Otherwise,
and do you undertake them not to oppose whoever he appoints to the justice portfolio?
Otherwise, the agreement falls apart, because if you look at the agreement, it makes it very clear that it's a matter for the Fine Gael leader who was elected, and the Taoiseach
of the day. Clarify that last point.
It just clarifies it, that it's a matter for the Taoiseach to appoint his cabinet, or her cabinet. In this case, it looks like it'll be he, as you say. So the Taoiseach will pick his cabinet, and we will facilitate the formation of that.
Irrespective of who is nominated to the justice portfolio.
That's a matter for the Taoiseach himself.
Micheál Martin, leader of Fianna Fáil, thank you indeed for joining us.